Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
There's nothing. Hi, everybody. My name is David Bell.
I am filling in for Tom. I am author Jason Pargin. Tom has not been fired. This is not a permanent change. This is just a thing where he had something that he deemed was more important than this, which is fine. It's fine. That's not saying anything about the show or you as the audience. There's other things in life than this. I know this is the most important thing in your life. But
and we just watched Society from the writer of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
He's about to find out the truth.
Why are you guys doing this to me, huh?
What, you've been living with these people all your life and you didn't know anything about this?
Is far worse than he could ever imagine.
and starring a man who is a legend in Hollywood. Because the star of this film, Society, is named Billy Warlock. His father was a famous stuntman who had the greatest name.
I didn't realize they were related.
Probably the greatest name in the history of English names. Dick Warlock. Dick Warlock was his name. Dick Warlock is when he went to a party and a woman would come up to him and said, "Hey, I haven't seen you here before. What's your name?" He says, "I'm Dick Warlock."
It's amazing.
What must it be like to have your dad be Dick Warlock, to be at school, and the teacher says, "Now, what's your father's name?" "My dad is Dick Warlock."
It is the best name ever made. He was also Michael Myers, I believe, and the shadow in The Thing, when the dog, that shot where the dog goes through the hallway and sees somebody, the shadow is Dick Warlock. I do know that.
He has an IMDb page that is long and impressive.
Before we get started, a couple things. Big old thank you to our patrons, Harris and Millie. They're the ones who asked us to watch Society, specifically you, Jason. They wanted you to see this film, Society. Harris and Millie, thank you. They are the ones responsible for this. And Jason, before we get started, also, what do you got going on? Like, what's new?
The new book is coming out now just in a few weeks. Or when does this episode go up? What day is this
week
for the listener? Okay.
Yeah, Thursday.
Okay, listen, this is actually important. There's an important detail here. The new book, standalone novel called I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom. Again, it is a standalone that is not part of any other series. If you are totally unfamiliar with my work, you can read this book cold. If you've never read any book before, this book will still make sense to you as long as you are literate. But even if you're not, there's an audio version. Well, somebody will read it to you. But listen. If you are hearing this before September 17th, 2024, and if you are a super fan, if you want a signed hardcover, I do not charge $500 for that. It is the exact same price as any other. We charge the normal cover price because my signature does not add any value to a book. If you want one, there is only, if I die, it will be very valuable. I am never going to die. So if you want one, there's only one place to get them. There's an indie bookstore in Nashville. You do not have to come here. They will ship it anywhere, including international. There's a link I'm going to read to you. Stop your car if you're in your car and write this down. bit.ly/signmybox. I'm not doing a bit. That will take you to a bookstore called Parnassus Books. They will ship anywhere. It's just like ordering a book off of Amazon, and it will say, order a signed hardcover from Jason Pargin. I will have signed it myself. It's not one of those stickers they put in there. I go there, and signed these with my hands. I have breathed on these. I have touched them. This is pre-order only. This is like when you buy a video game, and if you pre-order, you get like an extra little outfit for your Spider-Man that it's actually the ugliest outfit in the game, and it doesn't do anything, but it's just like that's your reward for ordering earlier. Okay, that's the only way to get a signed copy is if you pre-order. If you're hearing this after September 17th, you missed it. Everything I said just was a total waste of your time.
Oh, sorry, say it again.
bit.ly/sign my box.
And for the record, if someone brings you a book to sign, you'll slap it out of their hands after this, right?
If you approach me in public in any capacity, you're going to get an outcome similar to that, whether you've got a book with you or not. It's not because I'm mad at you. It's because I'm scared. You have frightened me. It's even though I get recognized in public all the time now, thanks to TikTok, I never get used to it. I am never any less startled than the very, very first time it happened. And you will not be happy with the encounter because you'll just be talking to a very nervous, frightened man. And the last time somebody came up to me at the mall, I said, "Oh, aren't you Jason Pargin? I follow you on whatever." And I just said, "Yes." And then I stared at them, and then we both walked away. And I'm sure they were expecting me to have something clever to say or something fun or for me to ask them questions about themselves. But I was so frightened, I didn't know what else to say. I'm not somebody who's been famous for a long time. Like you see Tom Cruise and he's like so gracious with fans and asking them, "Oh, wow, what's your daughter's name? Oh, you look so nice. You're so cute. Your little hat." Like, no, I'm just going to stare at you because I don't know what to do. It's fight or flight.
You're like a deer in the forest. Like observe from afar. Do not startle.
Yeah, and again, I'm not being mean about it. I just don't know what to do. It's the same reason why if you ask me to land a jet, then I say, because the pilot died, and I say I'm not going to do that. It's not because I'm lazy or I'm being a jerk. I'm saying I'm going to crash the plane. Right. So same thing. It's like if I'm not telling you not to come up to me because like, hey, I'm demanding boundaries. I'm mad at you. I'm not mad at you. I just don't know what I'm supposed to say, and I guess I never will.
Yeah, that's fair. I've only been recognized, I think, once, and all I did is I think I just repeated "thank you" a bunch of times, and then that was it. It's an incredibly awkward experience.
I should practice it in front of a mirror or something, but I'm very busy.
So for people who haven't seen Society, this is an 80s body horror film. It is, I guess that's all I know about it. I had never seen it before. I had seen the posters a lot. I had seen like screenshots. But it's about a young man in like high society and I believe Beverly Hills whose family is not what they seem. And he's slowly learning that. And they turn out to be a bunch of like weirdo freaks, right? Weird alien freaks, I guess.
So this movie, I thought I had heard of it because they mentioned it on Red Letter Media at some point, which I don't know if the world of podcasts, if you're supposed to mention other shows as
I mentioned them
being how you heard of something. And I thought when they described it, I thought this was like a cult favorite. It's apparently not even up to that level. I looked it up and I guess when it was released, it's dated as 1989 and it got a release in Europe. And because Europe is full of perverts, like it did okay over there. The United States, it didn't even get a release until 3 years later. It just sat on a shelf. And I think it got no reception and then probably was dumped straight to, I guess, would have been VHS still in 1992. But it doesn't even seem like it has that much of a cult following. And it's interesting to talk about because I get why they recommended me for this episode because horror comedy, body horror, a lot of gross out gore stuff, but it's done in a way that's like over the top and kind of slapstick in it. So it's similar to like the John Dicey novels and the books and the film, you could say. But I think this movie is actually a really interesting object lesson in how difficult it is to pull off something like that. Because sometimes when you see a movie that's in a genre where it seems kind of trashy, it's like a B movie and it's gory and it's like it's got some boobs and it's like gratuitous sex stuff. To make this work, even as that on that level, it is difficult. And I'm actually going to, and this is not in the spirit of this film, I can carefully dissect exactly what they did wrong.
Ooh. Okay, cool. Yeah. Because I mean, I didn't hate this movie. It kind of exists in that weird realm of like, because this director worked closely with Stuart Gordon, who made The Reanimator, which was, big body horror. And yeah, together, I believe they wrote Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which was originally, I think, supposed to be more of a body horror. And somehow,
I feel like you can still
some
see
amazing
the
process.
remnants of that.
Oh yeah,
right? Like there's definitely moments that it's like, oh, with some very minor tweaks, this could have been the scariest movie ever made.
Yeah, and this was the effects were by someone called Screaming Mad George, who, if you don't know that name, has done a lot of creature effects for films like Freaked, Big Trouble in Little China, worked on The Predator, Space Truckers, Spaceballs, which I assume they did Pizza the Hut. Because what else would you do in Spaceballs? But so like for me, this feels like a little like a demo reel. In fact, I looked at a little behind the scenes, and it turned out they started with effect ideas. They were like, "Wouldn't it be cool if we could do this, this, and this?" And then they built a film around that. And ultimately, this kind of shares that it's like that weird '80s, because there was a lot of body horror in the '80s, right? And this has that weird, like, soap opera, like, melodramatic music and acting and, like, soft Vaseline lighting where, like, it almost feels, like, innocent if it weren't, like, kind of Twin Peaksy, like, where it's, like, it's weird. It's, like, soap opera-ish, except for all the horrific body horror. And you can't quite tell what's supposed to be a joke and what's just funny unintentionally, So, like, I would say this is a good film to watch with friends, but it does have, it has a lot, it kind of drags, I would say, in the beginning.
This is the first thing I want to talk about, because there are lots and lots of horror classics that are based around exactly one sequence that everybody remembers. For example, if I ask everybody in the audience to close their eyes and picture the movie Psycho, that's a feature-length film, and you're picturing 5 seconds of a woman in a shower getting stabbed. Like, it was built around that image, that visual, that moment, which in the context of the film at the time, that's a shocking twist. That is the protagonist getting stabbed there. That's the person you spent the first 45 minutes of the film with. It is very oddly structured in the same way this movie is, because it is all setting that up almost as a prank on the audience, much like this. Yes, I have compared the film Society to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. But the point is, lots and lots of horror is based on one thing that sticks in your brain, like Alien with the chest burster. Now that's like iconic. At the moment, this is like the thing that happens in the movie, and all of the other stuff kind of maybe doesn't necessarily stick in your brain as well. And I think for every slasher movie, there's some key moment, there's a thing, a visual, a gross out, a sequence that sticks in your mind. So building an entire horror film around this sequence that comes at the end of the last 15 minutes is basically a big orgy. I guess we can spoil Society.
Oh, yeah.
But it leads up to a huge orgy where all of the rich people and the high society people basically get naked and their bodies all merge like the Thing into this big sex pulsing organism, gross out scene. And that's what the movie's built around. They struggle mightily to get the rest of the movie that leads up to that, because there's like 20 minutes of story in reality leading up to that. To stretch that out to feature length, because you've got a solid, I don't know, hour and 15 minutes or whatever before that scene starts, they repeat beats over and over. They have red herrings that don't go anywhere. There's like a little subplot where there's like voodoo imagery or stuff like that. It turns out to be nothing.
Right.
There's a repeated beat where the main character, like all the people stage like an intervention and capture him. That happens twice in a row for no reason. People will show up at a location and then leave again and then come back. It's structured. It is desperately trying to get to the thing that the filmmakers actually want to do. And I'm going to guess that orgy sequence probably ate up 90% of the budget.
Oh, yeah.
Like that probably took as long to shoot as the rest of this combined. And the rest of it, they are kind of throwing in scenes. of high school drama stuff that the stakes of which you don't care about once you realize that he may be in a society of humanoid monsters. And I think this is, if you're out there and aspiring to write stories or write movies, this is a great lesson, because if you go watch one of these other films, if you watch the rest of Alien, if you watch the rest of Psycho, and see how hard they work to give you something else to care about, knowing that the big thing is coming. They know that. They know that the audience doesn't know that. So
Right.
here, like, you're watching it, waiting for the thing to happen. But if you could transfer yourself back to 1992 and you've paid to see this in a theater, I think you'd be sitting there like, okay, like, are we going to see that lady naked again at least? Like, what are we waiting for?
Right, because it's that idea of like, are they building tension? And for a film like this, I'm not really watching it for that tension or that mystery. You kind of, especially now where you sort of know. I think even to be more precise, this movie, the exact point is a dad joke where the dad has his face on his butt. And he says something like the kid had called him a butthead earlier. And he says something like, how's this for butthead or whatever? Because like whenever I see this movie, that's the shot I see of the ass with the face on it.
So
But-
they had...
Oh, just to your point, they repeat plot points. Like they do the thing where a friend comes up to him and goes like, there's something going on. Come meet me here. And then the friend is found dead. That happens twice in this.
Yes.
And I was like, don't really need it twice.
Yeah, and like there's a sequence where he gets everybody around him, like stages an intervention and captures him and sends him off. They send him off to a hospital because they say that, well, you're paranoid, thinking that all these people around you are actually secretly monsters doing weird monster stuff. And then like 5 minutes later, he's allowed to kind of just walk out. And then he just returns back to that same scene and they just start over again. It's like they're just trying to get minutes of film down because you're not allowed to have a feature film. I've always felt like in a perfect world, you would be allowed to have a feature film that's like 48 minutes long if you want, because some movies don't need more than that. I've seen horror shorts on YouTube that are like 28 minutes and they're spectacular because, like, yes, they used only what they needed. They didn't feel forced to try to, well, we got to come up with a bunch of subplots to fill out the rest of this runtime. It's like, no, just if you've built it around one plot, one sequence, one character, you can just have that. But I know that that's not the way movies work, I guess. But here it's weird because, so like the plot, the setup as we've described it, it sounds like Get Out, right?
Yeah,
so you get
it's
a
like
person
gaslighting.
who encounters high society and then starts to get hints early on that there's something very weird going on. And then when he finally finds out what it is, it's way weirder than what you thought. Like, because Get Out, if you hadn't heard from a friend what it was about, it's a real shock what the actual thing is they're doing. It's because there's hints that it's like they're enslaving people or doing something weird, and that's like, no, they're doing like a weird brain transplant thing. Well, here it's weird because the kid, Dick Warlock's son, the actor, the protagonist is 17 in the film. He's a high school kid. And is slowly realizing that his parents and his sister are part of some sort of weird cult sex thing. He gets like little dribbles of information implying that there's some sort of weird cult and maybe almost some monster stuff going on. But there's no reason in universe why his suspicions would start that day. Because he's lived with them his whole life. Like, if you wrote a second draft of the screenplay, the first change you make is Dick Warlock's son is marrying into this family. He's like, let's say he's 18 or 19, and he has been going steady with their daughter, and she and her family are rich. He's an outsider. So he meets them, and let's say the plot of the movie is he's coming to stay with them for the summer. Or for a few weeks. And then while he's there, starts to get hints about their lifestyle. And then the whole joke is that these high society people in Beverly Hills are having weird monster orgies. But that you have to tell that story from a character coming from the outside and being introduced to it. Instead, this movie opens with him being a rich kid himself. Like he's the captain of the basketball team and he's running for class president, that his family is wealthy and he's rich and he's got a nice car.
Yeah, there's like a hierarchy here where like I couldn't for a while. I was like, is he the jock or the nerd? Because like we see him like doing this debate where he's like seemingly bullying this nerd on stage and everybody loves him. And then there's like higher jocks at the beach who like bully him. So like there's this weird hierarchy where they kind of wanted to have it both ways, where it's like we want him to be cool but also like picked on. So it is weird because he's just he's not really an underdog or anything. And it's really funny you bring that up because, yeah, that's exactly like Get Out, right? Is like meeting the family. And in this case, his family is not hiding it. Like they're weird freaks from the start. There's no like escalation, right? Like he walks in on like his dad giving his sister a back rub while his wife watches and they're all in lingerie. And he's like, what's going on here? And it's like, is this new to you? Because, yeah, you're like 17. You were born into this. It's real. It's like that was definitely one of the things that pinged me throughout, which is like, how did he not see this coming? I know they added stuff earlier, too. Like the sister, when her boobs are on backwards, that was an added scene because they were like, we need stuff to happen. But it just feels like because the whole town seems in on it, they're so overtly gaslighting that it's I'm not even sure like to what end. Especially since at the end he just walks out too. He just leaves and they let him.
And all of this criticism about the story structure and all that, lots of films are made where the story is an afterthought, and I don't mean that as a criticism. For example, the Mission Impossible films start with Tom Cruise sitting down with the other producers he works with and working out some stunts he wants to do.
Oh, yeah.
So it starts with, I want to jump a motorcycle onto a train, or jump a motorcycle and then open a parachute and jump onto a train. Why he's doing that and how this advances the plot, they have somebody else come in and figure that out later, because the movie is based around these stunts. In the last Mission Impossible movie, there's a scene where they are walking around an airport, like trying to track somebody. He's trying to pursue somebody. When they filmed that scene, when they had the airport that day, they had not finished the script yet and did not know what he was doing or why he was walking around the airport. They figured that out later, and they dubbed in like the voices in his earpiece and all that to now here's why he's doing that. But they shot it first, figured out the story later. Lots of movies, including movies you've liked a lot, were worked out that way. It's a series of like chase sequences or whatever. And then it's like, okay, let's sit down. We need a MacGuffin. We need a thing like they're trying to prevent or stop happening. And they fill that in, and you never knew, because all the other stuff was so cool. So here, clearly, the filmmakers, what they loved was those makeup effects, the latex, the gore work and all that. That was the star of the show. It's just that when you fill in this other stuff, if you want it to work, it actually requires a delicate hand, even if you're making something that's kind of trash. And I would say especially so, because your audience is going to get bored even more easily than if you were making something that's supposed to win awards.
Right.
Because so like here, they kind of, like the first thing I think that we see that implies there's something weird or monsterish going on is that he's like helping his sister zip up her dress and something like pulses under her skin. And so there it's like, okay, we've got a hint early that this is body horror or monster stuff, because you can't really lie to your audience about what genre they're watching. People don't like that. So even though, again, Psycho did it, it portrays itself as a crime thriller about a couple trying to steal a bag full of money, and then the serial killer stuff, he just kind of surprises you with. Usually you can't do that. So he sees that, and then there's the thing where he walks out on his sister in the shower, which would be, I think, weird even if nothing else happened. And then he sees her through like the frosted glass of the shower door, and you're supposed to be shocked because what he sees is her top half of her torso is twisted around. You see like her butt and her boobs are on the same side for some reason in the shower. She's just, and you realize that he's in a universe of like in these, there are these monstrous people that can contort their bodies into any shape. That's like the most compelling visual in the whole film. Like it's a great shot, but why is it there in terms of, because this has been his sister's whole life. Like if her body does weird stuff like that, there's no way that can be new to him. And when they hint at all of the weird incest stuff, like when he zips up her dress, it's kind of like sexy and it's supposed to be kind of horny. It's like,
sorry, she looked exactly like, I think, his girlfriend too, and I couldn't tell them apart sometimes, and that made it even creepier.
Yeah, because they're 80s movie babes, which, to be clear, we have said earlier, in case you're concerned, that these characters are 17. The actors are like 26. That's the way. There's a thing, as they're going to throw in a little side note here. One thing, as I've gotten old and cranky, a genre that I have come to find distasteful is older dudes writing high school kids and then casting 25-year-old porn stars, and the plot is that they're just constantly having nasty, hot sex with each other. And it's like, wait, I think you're rewriting your high school years in a way that you wish it had played out, and I think you might be cranking your hog to this. I think you cast like the hottest 25-year-old B-movie babe, had her play a 17-year-old cheerleader, and having hot, nasty sex with a bunch of other dudes. Wow, I think you jerked off to it. I think that's weird. I think that the show Euphoria does this, and I think it's weird. I think the guy who makes that show is cranking his hog to the dailies. I apologize if he is listening, and if that is an accusation. That is just my opinion. That is not based on any evidence I have. Anyway, side note, that's something that I actually found that more distasteful than the monster stuff, because it's like you have an unhealthy relationship to how you remember high school.
Oh, yeah. And again, the weird incest thing where you're like, what's going on here? Like, are we telling on ourselves? Yeah, like it's... I don't know. There's a lot of this, of course, in like, I like the Friday the 13th movies. And there's a lot of that too. And I feel like 80s horror had this thing where they were like, all right, there's a lull. Let's put some tits in there. Because like, that's why slasher films always have all these side characters so they can spread out the murders and then have this big spree at the end. And I guess like... this almost is more like a slow burn. Like this is almost set up more like a modern horror film in the sense that it's supposed to be like the slow unraveling mystery. But I kind of felt like I knew the mystery. And when you do those slow burns, I kind of need to like the characters or like there to be something besides the horror, or for it to be a horror, because this is body horror comedy. So it's not really, it's going for like messed up images. But as someone who's just seen so much of that, I'm so desensitized to that I'm like, I just need like something in that lead up.
This is
and like, it's just, I think about when you're talking about like, when movies think up the end and stuff like that. Like I've done that. I don't know if you have, when you've thought of stories where you're like, because sometimes it's helpful to know how something's going to end, right? Because I'm always paralyzed at the idea of like, I'm going to write the first 2 acts of something and then be like, where the hell is this going? And sometimes you want that perfect ending, but then you realize like, how do I get there? How do I fill in all this time? And like, sometimes you have to be willing to like either kill those ideas or like change it up in a really crazy way, I guess. I don't know. I was watching Invaders from Mars the other day. Have you seen that? The remake?
Sure.
And that movie begins like The Faculty. It's like a paranoid body snatcher. And then it becomes like like this crazy Big Trouble in Little China, like aliens on this ship, and then it becomes like a military film, and it felt like they were specifically avoiding that, where they're like, we could just make one of these things, but then you'd have to stretch it out, and so it's like, fuck it, let's just keep changing it up. And I think maybe this needed to do more of that or something.
I will not start a story until I know the ending. Because there's a saying in Hollywood that if you've got third act problems, if you can't figure out how to end your movie, you actually have act one problems. That you did not, there's something you did not set up at the start that needed to be paid off. That's your problem. So the whole thing has to hold together. So this is why the choice of not making the protagonist an outsider kind of ruins everything, because if he is, that is the thing that's propelling you through the story, which is him visiting. It's fun. He's nervous. Initially, the drama is how will he fit in? Right away, he notices something is off. Again, you see all of these beats in Get Out. Like right away, there's some little oddball thing. Somebody says something awkward. That film had comedy thrown in, numerous moments to help get you through. And then it starts to be propelled forward by the protagonist wanting to solve the mystery and then realizing he is trapped, thus the title. And that's what pushes you forward. So when the final horror is unveiled, that the people in Get Out are doing body horror stuff, that's not the thing you were waiting to see. That's the final horror that pushes you to want him to extract himself from this situation and to get to safety, because all of the people in power are in on this. There's nobody to get help from, and so all of his attempts to escape are being blocked, and he's got to kind of outwit these people, and that's what gets you through. Here, you don't have that. He just lives there. This is his parents. This is his family. This is his girlfriend. These are his friends. This is high school. Like all of these people are in on it, and there's no place for him to escape to. And he's been like, it's revealed at the end that he was adopted, but he was adopted, and also he's like a hunk and is the basketball star of the basketball team, and he's dating the head cheerleader and has another hot babe who's trying to have sex with him, and it creates a love triangle. And he's got tons of friends, and he's popular, and he bullies the other nerd who's trying to run for class president. And so in this film, in Society, he starts to get little hints that things are kind of weird or whatever. And then the tension is that they keep doubting his sanity. And it's like, well, is this a hallucination? But here's the problem with that as a plot point. If it's all just a hallucination, then it's boring because nothing is happening. Who cares? So every time when they'll have him talk to a psychiatrist or have him, like he swears he saw something, and then it turns out, well, there's no evidence here. It's like, well, you're kind of just spinning your wheels, because if he did just imagine it, we're literally just watching a guy running around and nothing is occurring. Everything is totally fine. So it has to be monster stuff. So the mystery of, did he imagine it, or are there really monsters? It's like, if I bought a ticket to a monster movie, it better freaking well be monsters. So you're wasting my time by throwing this red herring of, well, maybe he's just crazy, which is what drives this plot forward. Is one person, it's one authority figure after another trying to gaslight him into thinking that he didn't see what he just saw, that he didn't just see his sister with like her boobs turned around.
Yeah, I have a question. When you watch this, either through like, just hearing about it online, or just because you've watched so many things, I assume you sort of knew where it was leading to, right?
Yeah, because I think when they talked about it on Red Letter Media, it was there's one single moment where a guy, the main bad guy, the school bully, even though our guy is like runs the school, but apparently he has a bully who's that he gets into a fight with that. They like arrange it so he's gets in a climactic fight where everybody allows him to fight it out and to decide everything. And he reaches up through his body, because they have like squishy morphine bodies, and pulls his whole body inside out. He like grabs his face with his fist and pulls down, and then turns the guy inside out. And that's like the moment that's like the climactic makeup effect. And like the interior of his body is like full of weird worms and stuff. And that's the thing that's supposed to be like the moment. But I think the people go to look this up, they go look it up as the movie where that guy turns another guy inside out, which is a thing that happens 3 minutes before the final credits. So it's like, okay, I think it puts you in a situation where you're kind of just sitting there waiting for the thing to happen, because nothing on that scale is going to happen, anything like that, until the very, very, very end. And that's just a tough place to put the audience.
Right, because all right, so I recognize that it's not fair to compare to this movie to Get Out, but I think one of the things that made Get Out work so well to me is that you genuinely weren't sure what the fuck was happening for most of the film. And in fact, the things that would happen seemed so bizarre. Like the grandfather in someone else's body just randomly running at night. And it's like, you realize later, like, oh, he was a runner. He's enjoying this new body, yada, yada, yada. But at the time when you first watch it, you're like, what the fuck was that? Why is that dude just running in the yard at him? And it's fun to slowly see that unfold and go like, oh, okay. Like, I love the idea of telling a really weird, because like what made Get Out work was it was such a weird thing, a plot line that you'd never seen in a movie before. And they're only showing you pieces of it throughout, and those pieces look even weirder when you don't see the full picture. And so I'm wondering, like, if this film, when it came out, did feel that way to audiences, simply because maybe audiences were just less prepared for where this was working or heading. So like the sister showering backwards and all the little things felt more ominous and like creepy, and it felt more like a mystery was unfolding. Because I think a slow burn works if you're genuinely watching and going like, where is this leading to? And you don't know. But like, yeah, for me and you, it was like, I knew where it was leading to. So in my head, I was like, yeah, just get to the orgy. I want to just see all the weird shit you have prepared, you know?
So, like, for example, one of the first creepy things that happens is the main character and his the actor, his father was a man named Dick Warlock. I don't know if I brought that up yet. But Dick Warlock's progeny, he finds in his Jeep a doll that has like a screw screwed into its head. So it's like a voodoo doll. And then later in his locker, he finds like a voodoo, like a shrunken head. And then later, when he cheats on his girlfriend, has sex with another hot 30-year-old babe that goes to his high school, somebody puts like a sex doll in his Jeep and like writes on it. Well, you find out in the final act that was all just a prank his best friend was playing on him. That was totally unrelated to anything having to do with the plot whatsoever. That was utterly inconsequential, and any brain power you devoted to thinking or worrying about that was for naught.
That is a very good point. Because, yeah, even if I watched this not knowing where it was going, that would be cheap as hell, right? Like, and I've seen other horror movies do that. That's the equivalent of, like, you know, the jump scare where it's just their friend and they're just tapping on their shoulder and the camera jolts over. And it's like, the only reason that was scary is because you made it scary in the edit. It's not actually a scary moment. And you're right, like, that's a slow burn that isn't anything. That's the equivalent of it being all a dream, essentially, with that stuff. So like, yeah, I guess they were trying to like slather on more mystery there, but it is less fun when it's not, when it's just a bunch of dead ends as opposed to it all ties into something bigger. Because it would be cool if for some reason that shrunken head and that sex doll was like somehow related to it all, but it's not.
So,
right. So yeah.
The first thing that happens in terms of the actual central mystery and central mystery plot is that the main actor, I actually can't remember the character's name. Is it Billy?
God, I think they're all named as Billy, right?
I think the actor's name is the same as the character's name, which I always feel like if a movie has done that, it's because they found out that the actor can't remember the character's name and would not answer to it. Because like they're in a scene and it's like, Bobby, do you know? And he didn't turn around and look. It's like, no, that's you in the movie. You're Bobby. Like, I know that. And so here they decided, no, you know what? You're also Billy in the movie. If that makes it easier for you to respond to people. Anyways, that he has a friend who is initially think he's just a creep because they catch him like hiding in his sister's closet while she showers, because he needs to tell her something, which is, to be fair, he That doesn't make any sense.
He is a creep, right?
Yeah.
Like I think, yeah.
And they kind of do set it up because he like drives a van. He drives like a windowless van.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like, he doesn't look like the type of guy that would be, dating this high society daughter or whatever. But then he approaches Billy and says, hey, I've got something you need to hear. I have placed bugs around your family and I've caught there's this weird sex cult thing going on. So he has a recording of his parents and his sister and that dude from his bully from school that they're all having like an orgy. They're all doing like a group sex thing. And so in a different film, you could make that the central mystery. Like, let's say you don't have any of the hints of the body horror stuff. You don't have the thing where he zips up her dress and sees something pulsing under her skin. You don't have her contorting her body in the shower. You don't have any of that. It's initially just start trying to solve this thing. Like, is my family in a weird sex cult? Because then this guy who made the recording, he turns up dead. And they claim it's an accident. It's like, oh my gosh, how deep does this go? The police are in on it. Everybody in this town is part of a weird sex cult thing. And then you could reveal, not at the very end, but at, say, the 60-minute mark, that they're not human. They're weird monster people that can merge their bodies and like literally suck the juices out of victims and deflate them and basically turn everybody into a big mass of rubber and slime and all
like
that.
he spies on it or something. Like,
and then the final 30 minutes is him trying to get away from them. Like, make that shock the 60-minute turning point, that orgy scene. That's your tentpole scene. And then the final act is him trying to give him motivation. Like, let's say he's trying to rescue this woman or his friend from them and to get away, or trying to get some money because he doesn't have any money to live. So like, let's say he's got to like try to steal something from them. And then that's the rest of your movie. And then you keep upping the stakes on the type of weird monster people that are chasing him, where the cops turn into weird, gross monster things, all of which happens in that final scene. It's just that it all happens in one sequence. So I think you would need that orgy scene earlier and then separately have the last part of the film being him using his resourcefulness to get away. Instead, it's all very rushed. Like, he has no agency over what happens. At no point is he like driving the investigation. It's always whistleblowers just telling him things. And then he shows up at that party, the orgy at the end. And the way he gets out is he challenges his bully to a fight and gets them to agree, like, okay, well, if you can defeat this guy in combat, we'll let you go.
Why? It's so weird. I think that's all right. So what you just said, halfway point, I think combined with the idea that maybe, because like it would be helpful if the family wasn't so overt, like he has to work to find this out. And maybe part of the reveal is something like make it so that his family actually loves him or something. Like they adopted him like a pet. So like you could do a thing where they're not really trying to get him. Like you said, he's trying to save like a friend or like the people that are prey. And you can have this whole thing where like, they keep trying to keep him from running away. They try to like have him be there for the things or something. Like you could add in some really creepy ideas with the premise that this is a weird body horror family doing these orgies that also like don't want him to leave or be freaked out about it or something like that, and are trying to like make him understand like, no, you're one of us. We're gonna eat these other people though. Like that could go a long way when you add the idea that, they're genuinely trying to hide this, right? Like that would work for like the reveal of like your family that you've known your whole life is actually monsters. And that would work better with the gaslighting element, right? Like if you actually, because there are few and far in between movies where it is a reveal of like, there's nothing happening. And a lot of those movies get very bad reviews for that reason. But you can do it right, or those movies often get like appreciated later. So like it's a hard line to walk, but I feel like you could really dig into this as a psychological thing. But like as we said at the beginning, it felt like the orgy was most of their budget, so it's like where do you go from there? if you can't like afford to do more, I guess. And I don't actually know for sure. Or it just felt like, I don't know, maybe spread that stuff out a little more. Like if you thought of all these cool effects, don't dump them all at the end, I guess. But that's also kind of in line with, I don't know, like Dead Alive is like that. There's a few movies where it's like we're gonna go completely over the top at the end. I think that's what they were going for here.
I actually think every young writer and every young filmmaker dreams of making a movie that does something like that. Like Quentin Tarantino had his was From Dusk Till Dawn, where an hour into the movie, like it's just a crime thriller, straight crime thriller. There is zero foreshadowing that they're in a universe where vampires are real or that the supernatural is real. And then like an hour into it, they're attacked by vampires. That's it. And now it's a vampire movie. And I think the original ending of Clerks, Dante gets shot in the head by a burglar. And so that was originally the whole joke was these people live extremely low stakes, frivolous lives, getting into arguments at their little convenience store jobs. And at the very end, a guy comes in and kills him. And you realize the punchline was, oh, this guy spent the last day of his life just jerking around at work, like this meaningless job that doesn't affect anything, that's not fulfilling. Like, oh, he lived a truly meaningless life. I think lots of people have had that idea of like, wouldn't it be funny if you had a series like Downton Abbey and then in the season finale at the wedding, they're all attacked by werewolves and only
it's a very
then
film school idea, right? Like,
yeah. And again, zero foreshadowing. Like you don't follow. That's why I said it earlier about not following through on genre. Like you lie about what genre this movie is. So you didn't know it's a werewolf movie. You didn't know it's a vampire movie. You didn't know that it's a bleak film about death until the last 5 minutes. So
which is
there.
Oh, it's funny because the ultimate version of that is, of course, Psycho again, where it's like Psycho was allowed to do it basically once, and then after that it was like no one else can really do this.
Yeah, and again, I wish if I could have a film going experience, it would be to go back in time and see Psycho in the theater like opening weekend before word had gotten out about this prank that Alfred Hitchcock had played on the audience, because people do not know the woman in the movie. It's like you had Anthony Perkins, like he doesn't show up until 45 minutes into the film. The woman who gets stabbed in the shower, she was a film star probably on the level of like Zendaya today. She maybe not the biggest star in Hollywood, but she was box office. It was her face on the posters. And the film opens with her, and she is in every single shot, every scene. Yeah. You are only following her, and it's her effort to steal this money from a shady guy she met through her employer because she wants to run away with her boyfriend and he's broke. So she has got this cash, this envelope full of cash, and it's all about her in this cat and mouse game with the people who are pursuing her, the police, getting away, and she's not an experienced criminal. And she makes multiple stops, and at one point stops at this creepy hotel. And the movie makes you think that the threat is that this creepy hotel owner, played by Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates, that he's going to steal her money. Yeah. Because he has a conversation with her in which he reveals his mother is sick and disabled. The hotel doesn't make any money because they changed where the highway goes, so nobody stops here. We're in financial dire straits. And then the camera keeps cutting to that money she's hidden inside a newspaper on the nightstand. It's like, oh, this is going to be about a cat and mouse game, him trying to get that money and maybe to kill her to cover the crime. And then so she goes to take a shower, and then suddenly somebody walks in and stabs her like 100 times. And the only protagonist you have known is now dead. And the camera actually zooms in on her face like it's going to do that thing where her eyes are like open and there's blood everywhere. And you think it's going to do that thing where it focuses in on her face and suddenly she's like... and wakes up and like she's wounded. And it's like, oh, now she's got to patch up these stab wounds. And now this guy's taken her money and run away. Now she's got to like get him, because without this money, she's screwed. Like she's ran away. She's abandoned her job. And it's like, and the camera keeps going closer and closer on her face. And it's like, no, she's just dead. Yeah.
And you watch him bury her.
You watch him. No, he crams her body into the trunk of the car she pulled up in. And then he goes
Yeah.
around and he searches her room for anything, any evidence she may have left behind. Any clothes, her shoes, he's grabbing everything, takes all out. And the camera cuts to that money still on the nightstand. And then he walks in one last time, grabs the wad of newspaper because she had hidden her cash, the cash that her entire life had been about is wrapped in newspaper. He thinks it's just trash. He throws it in the trunk of the car, takes the car, and drives it into the swamp. And that's it. Your protagonist and the MacGuffin is in that trunk, and they are gone from the movie. You are now following the killer in his effort to get away with it. There's never been a movie like that before or since. And I think this is why so many people wish they could do that, because the balls on that man. And the only reason he was allowed to do it is because it was so cheap to make. Psycho is only black and white because it was cheaper. And he used his crew from like his TV show, and they used like a backlot they had that one set of the house, and that's pretty much it. And the only reason anybody agreed to make this stupid ass idea for a movie is because, one, he's a legend and had made a bunch of blockbusters, and two, because he made it on basically nothing. They shot it in a few weeks.
Yeah, and I love that we're talking about Psycho now, but like I think what also makes that movie work somehow is that he still keeps to structure even while doing that, which is that like that's like the halfway point. That's the point where something you naturally something and like unexpected happens, right? And it doesn't matter, like the first act offers her stealing the money, so there's all this tension around her and that cop that like stops and her like switching cars and all that stuff. And so it's like you're still riveted throughout the movie. And there's no moment where you're bored because they're tricking you, because they're doing something different. They're keeping to like the fundamental rules that make a movie still interesting while breaking all the rules at the same time. Because normally if you kill the protagonist halfway through, a lot of audience members are going to be like, well, why the fuck should I care now? But they maintain the mystery of people looking for her and being like, what happened to her? So like that thread continues through. So it never feels like Phil, From Dusk Till Dawn, I think also achieves this pretty well, which is like, you can't just say we're making a totally different movie in the halfway point, because then you have to start over, right? And people will be like, well, you just wasted my time for the first half. So he pays off the stuff still set up in the first act in an interesting way, which is very important to making that movie work, I think.
And it finishes those characters' arcs. It finishes Harvey Keitel's character's arc of losing his faith. And then it finishes and whatever they're trying to reclaim with his wife having died. And then George Clooney's character being a dirtbag, having to act unselfishly and like cooperate because it establishes that it's him and his brother and basically nobody else. He cannot function. And here he's now having to like join this found family to try to get away and escape this situation. It's all part of, on the character level, it all continues to pay off. It's just that their circumstances have changed. But I guess we keep bringing up these examples by master filmmakers because this is difficult to do. If you're sitting down to make a movie like this, like Society, which, by the way, this is a genre of film. Person who realizes that high society has a dark underbelly. There's lots of movies like this. It's a Blue Velvet. There's lots of movies that are where there's like the start of the movie. These people are all very wealthy in a peaceful neighborhood, and there's something weird going on behind the scenes. How you dole out the revelations is a careful little dance you have to do because they each have to raise the stakes. You can't give away the game too early, but here I feel like they had no confidence that they could tell a story that people would find interesting if it was just this high school kid trying to navigate his paranoia and the social situations, and then him feeling like he's a fish out of water, even though, again, in the context of the film, he was born there. They didn't believe that would carry them through. So they had to insert some of this other weirdness. But once you've demonstrated early on, oh, your parents are monsters, everything else is kind of like, I don't care that kid with the van is dead. His parents are monsters. Like everything we thought we knew about the universe is wrong. And so like they've got plot points that are high school drama stuff. Like there's a moment where he gets up in front of the high school debate class and says like My parents are monsters. And everybody laughs at him. And you're supposed to feel this crushing tension, like, oh my gosh, his classmates have laughed at him. How will he live this down? It's like, no, that doesn't matter. His parents are monsters. There's monsters. Monsters are real. He's living in a universe in which monsters are real. None of this makes any difference. There's a point where he attends a high society party and gets like thrown in the swimming pool, and all the other kids laugh at him. And you're supposed to be like angry, like, that bully threw him in the pool and everybody's making fun of him. What a jerk. Like, nope. No, his parents are monsters.
Right.
That doesn't matter. We've already hinted that his sister can contort herself into a monster of some kind. This is all irrelevant.
Right. They're sort of tap dancing and trying to do just regular teen stuff. All right. I want to compare this to a movie that is a little more fair. And that movie is The Faculty. And I like The Faculty. It's not a huge movie or anything, but that movie has the everybody is an alien, right? It's the body snatchers. It's different than this in that one everybody's slowly becoming the aliens. But that movie starts with a group of high school kids, an ensemble that all kind of hate each other. They're all in different social groups, and then they have to come together because of this threat, right? And that's, even though that movie has to spend a long time with the reveals, it's interesting enough to watch, like, oh, this is the nerdy kid team up with like the weird drug dealer kid teams up with the popular girl, and so on and so forth. Like, I think maybe that's what this movie needed a bit more, is like, instead of all that tap dancing in the middle, like, it would have been good if, like, and they start that way, right? Where he's like being bullied by this jock and there's this nerd kid, and they keep starting that idea where a guy comes up to him and goes, I think something's going on, and then they kill off that character or they move on. And it's like, this maybe needed to be like a more growing ensemble of people trying to work together who don't normally get along, and then it gives you a reason to sort of watch these characters, even if it doesn't have a lot to offer in terms of like the horror effects along the way right away.
They tried to do that, and this is a great example of doing it badly. So, for example, Billy's has a best friend, I think, and the name is he named Elliot? I apologize for not knowing the characters' names.
I wouldn't apologize for that.
But he has a best friend. His best friend does not have a character. You see them playing basketball together at the beginning. You see them have a couple of conversations, but in terms of what is his character, is he funny? Is he sarcastic? Is he the kind of a troublemaker? Is he smart? Is he a nerd? You don't have any of that. He's just kind of there, and he's not like on this journey with the hero, even though that friend character is the one who at the end is like the key person who has to rescue him.
Yeah.
The person who the best friend character arrives with to help is the mother of the girl who seduces him, and she's nonverbal for some reason, for some unspecified reason. She's like a comic relief character where she's like this large woman who can't talk, and it's never explained why. The other person is this woman named Clarissa, who Billy has a girlfriend. She's like the head cheerleader, whatever. And then while he's at the debate, this dark-haired troublemaker girl spreads her legs and shows him her crotch during the debate. That's how we meet her. And then it's like people say, hey, she's trouble. And you think, oh, this is like evil high society's seductress, slut they sent along to try to use sex to seduce him into their weird sex cult. No, she's another protagonist. Turns out she's one of the good ones, and that's how they met. So he has sex with her, cheats on his girlfriend, but it turns out that's, I guess, what we wanted to happen.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell her motivations, because she does the backwards thing at one point, and I'm like, can they not control that? Like, it seems like she's a red herring in that we're supposed to believe, she's actually one of them. She's bad, and then at the last minute she's good, and I'm not quite sure why.
But she also doesn't have a character. She starts out as troublemaker, like seductress. She's like the skank. She's the tramp or whatever. Like, it's over the top in how they portray her as overtly sexual. She's not interested in him as a person whatsoever. She's not interested in telling him about her own personality. She's just pure sex seductress. 17-year-old sex seductress. Again, it's the 80s. This is how we did it. And so he winds up with her, and then she winds up helping him escape at the end. Like, no, I feel bad about what you're doing to this guy. But again, they don't have a relationship. She doesn't have a character. But just saying about a movie, hey, what you should have done is you should have made your characters more interesting. That's not easy. Not everybody can do that. There are productions that cost $300 million to make where they failed to do that on even once. So this is where, I'm telling you from my own experience, this is where being able to write humor helps, being able to write funny dialogue helps, funny exchanges. Humor is a great way to build empathy for characters. If they can joke, if they can poke fun at themselves, if they're funny, or if they get into funny situations, and that's automatically like a bonding thing. But at the end, you do have like the found family of his best friend, the nonverbal mother character, the skanky woman, Clarissa, and Billy. They all escape together. Oh, wait, no, they don't. They leave the mother behind.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
With the orgy. Yeah, they drive off without her. They do not mention it. She doesn't die. If she died or sacrificed herself, it happened off camera. They don't show it. The last thing you see is her like jumping in to rescue him from getting attacked at one point. But she doesn't like sacrifice herself. It's just a comical moment because she's like a big woman and she like pins a guy to the ground or whatever. And then they drive off to go live happily ever after, escaping the evil monster high society. But Clarissa is with them. She leaves her mom behind. They just forget to get her. They forget to rescue her.
I think talking about what does this film have to offer in that regard? Like, okay, maybe they're not good at writing jokes. Maybe characters aren't their strong point. What definitely is true from the start of this production, based off how they started it, was that they knew how to make good creature effects, right? That was the whole thing. And I think then they then should have spread those out, is really ultimately what I think is the issue with this movie that I had, where I was so bored because they're just not like, that's their talent, right? And so it's like, okay, show it from the first scene. Show it as much as you can. Write a story where a creature does this weird Gumby shit and sucks someone into them or whatever. Have them do it every 10 minutes then, right? Because like, all right, if you're a martial arts team and you're making, The Raid, what do? You don't make a story that leads into a really cool fight scene at the end. That fight scene might be really cool, but you have to know, like, well, listen, we're good at martial arts. Let's make sure people see that as much as possible, because I don't think we'd be caring about the characters or picking apart that character stuff nearly as much if every 10 minutes they showed us some really cool effect that we hadn't seen before, right? Because that was clearly their strength. And so, like, that's ultimately, I think, my issue with this film is, like, if you're making a gore film, do it. Do it throughout.
Well, now you're talking about The Thing, which oddly enough is a film that also bombed horribly when it came out. And to this day, I'm not totally sure why. Maybe just because it came out in one of the all-time greatest years for film, and because like Blade Runner also bombed in 1982, but it was just buried under a bunch of other classics that came out that year. But The Thing, you could watch if you just sat down and made a list of the stuff you saw and how they dole it out. And the way they start with small scale, but the nature of the movie you're in is made apparent pretty early, but it's still a mystery. And then the revelations are as they dole out more and more information about how the creature works. So it takes over a dog, and then it takes over a person, and then you realize that it totally can change the entire body of a person and turn their head into a spider. They keep escalating, and then the finale is not necessarily, oh, here's the biggest and scariest version of the creature. Now I'm having to fight a creature that's 200 feet tall. It's more and more paranoia, more and more tension. And then finally, the final thing is just the last two characters sitting out there drinking together and basically waiting to freeze to death, because this is the only way to keep the creature from escaping the containment of this facility. And so that's a good template. I think Alien is probably my all-time favorite in terms of every plot turn is doling out another piece of how this organism works. Yeah. It's like, oh, what's this derelict spaceship? oh, what are these eggs? What are these eggs? Where did those come from? I'm going to put my face right up to one of them. Oh, a thing hopped out of it's stuck to this face somehow. Why is it doing that? Is it eating his face? Let's get it off. Oh, it's got acid for blood. It's acid. It's eating all the way through the floors of our spaceship. That's weird. Oh, the creature fell off of his face. I guess it's done. Maybe it's over now. Maybe we can all just go home. Oh, wait, he's got a thing jumping out of his chest. Now we've got a baby alien running around. Oh, wait, this thing grows up really fast. It's now a big and dangerous alien. Oh, this thing is way smarter than we thought. It's actually kind of crafty in how it's able to hide and strategize. So you have a list of like, what did I name off? Like 7 distinct points. Then it finally gets down to the final girl, the alien, and blowing it out of the airlock. But each turn is revealing a little more with a little new creature effect and just kind of upping the stakes a little bit, but you dole it out. But that's kind of what they wanted to do here. But again, it takes a masterful storyteller to know exactly how to dribble that stuff out so you're always wanting to know more. What they showed you was interesting, but you're like, well, yeah, but this happened, therefore what? This guy has this thing stuck to his face, but he's still alive. It's keeping him alive. Why? What's going to happen? What's going to happen next? Well, it fell off. Why? Is it dead? What's going to happen next? And each stage you want to know more. That is difficult to do. It's unfair to ask this movie to know how to do that.
Yeah, because again, it feels like it was mostly crafted by people who are like, this is a really good effects reel that we're sticking a plot on. But like to that point, that evolution in Aliens shows more creature effects, right? They are still showing off where they're like, oh, you think this is all we can do? We can also make this larger alien, or we can do these different things. So it is like, as like a film showing off creature effects and a film showing off just the concept of this creature, and you're slowly learning more. It is really cool for that, right? And this, I didn't get any feel like at the end when he pulls them inside out, I was like, are they just like a rubber suit with some bugs inside? Like, I couldn't understand what these things were, and I wish like I was genuinely wondering that. I was like, what's under that skin, you know? And it never really explains why they're these weird Cronenberg freaky things, these rubber. They seem fairly easy to defeat, like you can just pull them inside out.
Well, if we haven't made it clear, at the end, in that end orgy sequence, there's a bunch of distinct creatures that they show in rapid succession that they could have doled out through the film. Yeah. So, for example, when I said earlier that they could have like the nasty sex orgy thing happen at the 60-minute mark, well, in the course of that finale, you also see like a guy when they're doing like they've captured the kid who tried to like rat them out, and they're all like sucking his juices or whatever. And there's one point where a guy reaches his hand up and his hand comes out of the kid's mouth. So that's one moment. And then separately, his psychiatrist says, well, let me give you a hand. And he turns his head into a giant hand.
Yeah,
seemingly
he sure did.
Just to like taunt him. And then he escapes into a bedroom and finds his mother has transformed her body so that now her legs are a pair of arms, I guess her father's arms. But then like his sister's head comes out of her vagina. And then separately he sees his dad, who has made his own. He's merged his head in his butt so that he's like farts as he talks. And everything I'm saying here makes it sound like it's a comedy, like it's screwball, like this is like Pee Wee Herman stuff. But that's the other thing, is that tone does not happen until the last few minutes of the movie. It is not screwball. There is not a single funny moment until that. And I get that they wanted it to be like you're never expecting this, like this is gonna hit you out of nowhere. But that's kind of the challenge you have to make for yourself, where if you say, well, I'm going to have him glimpse his sister and her body's turned around. I'm at a scene where he has sex with a girl, because we first had sex with Clarissa, you mentioned like she like grows another arm, and she's like got another arm that's caressing him, but it's from the wrong direction. He freaks out, and then she's like, what? You know, I don't know what's wrong, and because she's like gone back to normal at that point. And then you see like at 60 minutes in, you see like the big orgy scene, and then you challenge yourself to say, okay, now that they've seen this, I can't have like blown my wad here. Everything that happens from here on. So you keep having him getting chased by increasingly weird, grotesque, funny, if you want, creatures. And then that's where, but they never do explain what these people are. Because at one point he says, oh my gosh, you're aliens. You've all been replaced by aliens. And they have to explain, oh no, to be clear, that would make the movie make sense. If we're like little alien, like say, some sort of little alien worm monsters, and we've just built these fake rubbery human bodies so that we can move around among you, but these bodies, we can just adjust them on a molecular level and turn them into anything. That's a pretty cool concept. They make it absolutely clear. No. We're not aliens. We've always been like this. Always. High society people are all like this everywhere. Once you reach a certain income level, you can manipulate your body you can turn your head into a giant hand if you want. And that's it. Like that's it. That's all the explanation we're going to get, which I get that this film is not about the science of it.
Right. But
it doesn't set the rules for what they can do, which you do need. Like in Alien and The Thing, both the rules of what the creature can do once it's shown is extremely clear. And that's important. It's important for the drama of it.
Yeah, even though it is like a showcase of visual effects, another film that was like that is The Wishmaster. And I'm not about to say The Wishmaster is the same as, I don't know, Aliens or Psycho, but as that movie also famously ends with like a big orgy of nonsense, right? Of like gore and tentacles and stuff. But to its credit, it has actually a built-in plot reason why, which is that it's the series of wishes, but it's also unleashing hell, right? So it's like, okay, it's generic hell shit where like statues are coming alive and people are merging with objects and so like you're able to see all those effects and go like, got it, it's hell stuff. Like is that like a really satisfying explanation? No, but like we're showing all these things we can do and we've given you an explanation, and it just felt like this one they were like, it's good enough to just kind of show you everything we can do, and here's all we can do. Does it make sense? No. And it's just going to sort of leave you asking more questions, because ultimately that's where I was at the end. I was like, why did any of that happen? Why are they doing any of that? Was it Satan? Again, like, tell me it's Satan then. Tell me they're hell creatures. Then I'm like, sure, got it. You know? Like, fucking fist for a head. All right, it's hell. It's the devil. But, like, yeah, they very specifically say, like, haha, we're not aliens. And it's like, okay, then what are you? And then they don't answer that question. And so it's weird that they even called attention to it to begin with, I guess.
Yeah, because again, the story is not that this polite town has been taken over by something. The premise is specifically that it has always been like this, and that this guy grew up in it and just somehow never noticed. Kind of makes him seem oblivious. And I'm sure there's on some level, there's like a metaphor how when you grow up, you start to see your parents differently. And if you just thought of your parents as your parents, you don't think of them as people. And then one day you get old enough to see them as, oh, they're corrupt or they're greedy or whatever. But if that's what they're trying to convey, maybe struggled a little bit here.
Considering the name, I think it is a metaphor for the idea of joining society as a young kid and learning that the society you're supposed to join is horrifying. But like, then make it more abstract then. Make it more Lynchian, I guess. Really, again, it comes down to give me something to glom onto in those first two acts, because it was kind of trying to be a little too literal for that message, I guess. And I don't know. There, like you said, there was no real humor. Like, it's listed as a horror comedy, and the comedy really just comes in how outrageous the ending is, and they kind of throw it away at the end. Like, it ends with him being like, "Oh well, he killed that guy," and he turns to another kid, and he's like, "I guess the summer internship is yours," or something like that. But it's weird to start a movie serious and then end as like kind of a nihilistic comedy. It's
because
a weird.
It's not an
tonal
Evil Dead
shift.
movie. It's
Yeah.
not where, because again, those films very carefully establish the tone very early. Like, this is the type of movie you're watching. There's legitimate horror, truly scary creature effects, but also it's slapstick. This is a slapstick universe. You're going to see this character endure injuries that would paralyze a normal person and put them in the hospital for 6 months, and he's just going to brush it off. This is that type of movie. It's a slapstick, cartoonish universe where it's very gory, but it's very silly. But you have to establish that early on. You don't get any hints of that here. Which again,
No.
I realize that because the guy who made this, what else? Other than Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, what else did Brian Usna? What else did he work on?
I think he worked on Bride of the Reanimator. I think he did a lot of Stuart Gordon stuff. He's a producer, it looks like. So he produced a lot of Stuart Gordon stuff. He did Return of the Living Dead 3. Damn.
Didn't know there was a third.
Oh, people like that one.
Okay.
I haven't seen it in a while. He did The Dentist, which is a movie I've not seen, but I believe that's like a body horror, gory dentist thing. Beyond Reanimator he did. So yeah, a lot of that like sort of body horror, like, you know, you're walking through the video store and you see these like specific covers that are usually like way better drawn than what the movie actually is. It feels like it's that. He worked on The Guyver, which I just reviewed, the sequel to The Guyver, which was also kind of people showing off what they could do effects wise and not really focusing on plot. So like a lot of cult films, it seems like, where very few of them kind of burst. You know, Stuart Gordon, I think, The Reanimator and From Beyond sort of like was like slightly elevated from that. And like the 80s, I mean, the 80s loved this body horror stuff.
Well, The Fly came out in 1986, so 3
Yeah.
years before this. And The Fly, I consider to be the apex of that genre.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful demonstration of doling out the body horror in dribs and drabs and building up to it, building up. It's a little bit, because when it arrives at the end, it's worse than you could possibly have imagined, and it keeps topping your expectations. Not
Right.
many films can do that. Again, that's a classic, an all-time classic. Jeff Goldblum, the way he acts the part, like everything about it is masterful, but it is about latex effects, creature effects, gore, makeup. It's all of that same stuff where somebody could use it as their reel, as their show-off reel. And let me make it extremely clear. The amount of labor that went into that last sequence, the orgy sequence with all that, the amount of actors and stunt people and performers in latex for hours and hours and hours and being absolutely doused in, they have like a slime, whatever they use, the slimy substance that looks good on camera. They had to have had gallons of it because they're absolutely covered in it. That is a shoot that is brutal and difficult and miserable.
Yeah.
That is work on top of work on top of work. That is latex appliances falling off of people's faces and stuff being glued on that doesn't stay in the right spot, and trying to get shots and lighting to not show seams. There's so much work and craftsmanship in that big, long, gross out sequence that all of the labor and the love and the care went into that and making that stuff look good, because it's borderline cartoonish and weird. It doesn't look like something that's actually happening to people, but it also does, for the most part, look really good. There's a part where they all have to like transform back into people again. When I watch the actors and they're all just doused in fake blood, doused in slime, or they've got latex appliances all over their bodies, covering their faces entirely. It looks like it would be hot and miserable. I keep saying the word hot. If you've never been under film lights, it's hot. It's just it's so wearing latex under, like, you're just sweating through all of that stuff. And there's a bunch of people all riding on top of each other. I think it would be a sweaty, miserable, sticky, literally painful mess that probably took weeks to shoot and was probably a nightmare to make it look right and make it look good. There was a lot of labor and craftsmanship. Nothing about that is lazy or slapdash. It's just that the part of the movie leading up to that was not the part they were interested in.
Yeah. No, there's a reason the person did the makeup effects and special effects went on to have a huge career, especially in the 80s, where it's like, yeah, that is extremely good work for sure. And so, like, I don't know, as an effects reel, I guess it accomplished what it wants. I know it's kind of this is a cult favorite. And again, I can see why, if you're just hanging out with friends, talking over the boring parts, and then paying attention to the good parts, but like sitting and just watching it, like if this was in a theater, I would be so bored for most of it. It just doesn't have the weirdness, like I think about the Friday the 13th, like Crispin Glover in his insane dance, and like there's always been this 80s movie slasher thing where they're like, we need to make the characters just completely unhinged so you have something to pay attention to between the kills, and like some 80s movies do it really well, some don't, and this, I don't know, there wasn't enough to grab onto here.
A lot of that is in the casting. It's but I do think movies like this were for the home video market back then. Like you said, I think people watched movies differently back then, and they're picturing a bunch of dudes who's rented the film, or a bunch of high school kids or college kids, whatever, in their dorm maybe, and they're watching the same way that The Evil Dead became a legend. That was not people going to the theater. That was people watching on VHS and just being shocked and laughing their heads off. And there's a new thing that happens every few minutes. It's like, oh my gosh, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. So there were lots of movies that attempted that to varying degrees of success. A couple of notes I did want to bring up before we wrap it up. One, early on, when Dick Warlock's kid goes to the beach with his hot cheerleader girlfriend, and they start making out, and she's in a bikini, and where the camera's like zooming in on the boobs of this 25-year-old woman who's playing 17. In the background, there's plainly visible a can of Diet Pepsi with the logo plainly visible. I love the idea that Diet Pepsi funded this entire film. I know that in reality, back then the rules of putting stuff like that in, they didn't care, didn't pay attention. But I would love that was product placement that they convinced.
Yeah, I still don't understand, because I know, like, the making of Clerks, they're in a convenience store and they actually covered a lot of the labels. But I think in the commentary, Kevin Smith was like, I don't know what the legal thing was, so we just covered them. Like, it seems like if you could Diet Pepsi like sue, I don't know. I have no idea how that works, but it is very funny. It would be amazing if Pepsi just kept showing up. It was at the orgy scene,
Guy emerges out of another woman's butthole and takes a drink of Pepsi. For those of you who follow my podcasting guest career closely, the podcast series I do called Big Feats, where we are doing an episode by episode watch along of a cryptid hunting reality show called Mountain Monsters. In the first few episodes of that show, they prominently driving a Ford truck with the Ford truck logo visible. And then starting like episode 4, they have like black tape over where Ford literally called them up and said, no.
No, we're good.
You cannot pretend to hunt Bigfoot in your Ford truck. We will absolutely send our lawyers and a hitman to put a stop to this.
That's incredible.
The other thing I wanted to call out, that there's a key moment where they're still trying to play up the high school stuff, and our main character, Billy, is trying to get, his girlfriend wants to get invited to a party being held by Billy's bully, but this is an even higher society party than the high society they already live in, even though his parents live in what looks like a 50,000 square foot mansion. Yeah. These people live in an even bigger mansion, but whatever. He finally gets an invite to that party, and he receives that invite via Telegram.
Thank you. I wrote this down too. At one point, a bully says, "I'll send you a telegram," and like a joke. And they kept talking about telegrams, and I was like, does mail not exist in the 80s? What is happening?
This was 1989 when it was made. Let's say was shot in 88. I would have been 13 years old in 1988. That's how old I am. I don't know what a telegram is. If you told me to send you a telegram, I would not know how to do it. Is there like a place that you go and and what is it? Like, why couldn't I just call you or send you a letter in the mail? Because if you're sending mail in town, it's the next day. Like it's not like a long time thing. If you're trying to get a letter to one of your classmates, they'll have it the next day. So what does a telegram do? Does anybody know? Do you know?
I don't know, man. I guess it is supposed to show like these people are fancier, right? Like they're fancier than our already fancy protagonist. They send telegrams.
Okay, is that any of you guys out there, if you can comment on this or on social media, was that like a high status thing in the 80s where you were so fancy that you could send messages? Because again, this was pre-email. We get that, but
what he should say is, "I'll send you a fax," then, right? Because like that's like, oh, so fancy. Like telegram is like, I'll send like a guy in a horse. Like I'm imagining like a worse version of communication. So yeah, I don't know what that was.
Because I get in the Old West, they had the telegraph, the little thing where they would use Morse code and beep it out, but that was pre-telephone. And that was pre-mail. That was when, mail had to be sent by horse. So like being able to beep out a message over the wires was a huge thing. That came out of nowhere. And again, if that was supposed to be funny, see now the fact that they thought this was a comedy, I'm wondering if lots of these moments were supposed to be funny, but they're not played that way. Not really.
No. That was a big thread throughout where I was like, I'm not sure if that's actually a joke or not, or if it's just weird 80s stuff. Man, telegrams are so old. I Googled it, and even Google's like, do you mean this app? Like the first page of Google is just all like, all right, there's a software called Telegram. Surely you aren't talking about like the old timey telegrams. So I don't know, man.
Because if I sent a telegram to somebody, how do they get it? Like here, it appeared that a person showed up at the house at their door, like, hey, you got a telegram. I handed it to them, but couldn't that rich family just have their butler drive it over to them? Like, why would it need to be a telegram? Why couldn't they just put an invite in his mailbox? Just drive over there. You're in the same town. Just drive over there.
I get it's supposed to be formal, but just call them. Yeah, just I don't know. It's real weird. All right. I think that's it for Society. Do you have any other?
Well, if people are asking whether or not it's worth watching, one, it's a little hard to find. I'm not saying that I watched a low quality upload on YouTube, but that is a place that you can watch it if you want the creators to get a couple of cents of residuals if they're still alive. If you want the Dick Warlock estate to get paid for seeing it, I think it's on one of the horror services like Screambox.
Screambox, yeah. What's funny is the Screambox version you can also watch for free. And what's even weirder is they censor the nudity, but not on the YouTube. Not that there's much nudity. It was just really weird that Screambox is like, I guess if you pay for Screambox, maybe what they're doing is they're like, if you pay, we won't censor this. I don't know what their business model is.
But so in terms of is it worth watching, it's got one sequence that has made it famous and is a reason everybody remembers it. You're going to spend the whole movie. If you want to fast forward and just watch that part, I'm going to be honest with you. You have not really missed much. There's a couple of cool creature things they do prior to that. But it's the reason it's famous is the last 10 or 15 minutes. It goes on a little bit, but it's that last final thing, the final, when they show up at the party and everybody's there. And you could honestly just watch that part and you would have gotten 95% of the enjoyment out of it, because if you say, well, yeah, but if I watch it, then I'm not going to know who these characters were or what their motivations were. You're not going to know that anyway. They're kind of just there to get you there. They are a vehicle to get you to that effects work that they put a lot of time and effort into. And it's worth watching. Somebody worked really hard on that. Some of you out there who really like this kind of horror, it's one of the best examples of it, of like that, the old school latex body horror before this could all be done with CGI, which is how it would be done today. And it would look like trash. It would not look like anything. In terms of latex body horror effects stuff, yeah, there's a reason why people asked us to talk about this. There's a reason why this movie got mentioned by Red Letter Media, 35 years later. There's a reason why of all the direct-to-VHS horror stuff that's been forgotten, there's still people that remember this, and it's because of that sequence.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a great sequence. So yeah, if you like body horror, absolutely check it out. You probably already have. And thank you, Harrison Millie, so much for, because this was on my list. This was one where I was like, I need to watch this movie at some point. So thank you for giving me a reason to watch it, Harrison Millie. And thank you, Jason, for being on. Right at the end of this, you wanna once again tell us where we can find you?
Yeah, if you want to follow me on TikTok or social media, I'm Jason K. Pargin, Pargin, on TikTok and Twitter. I'm still on there. And also YouTube and Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky and Facebook. The book is called I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom. And again, for the few super fans out there who want one that I have signed with my own hands, that promotion is through bit.ly/signmybox, SIGNMYBOX. And that will redirect you to a cool indie bookstore here in Nashville. And they will send you a signed hardcover right to your house, and that I will have signed myself. We don't have like a machine signing them for me. I don't have a stamp. I will sit there with a pen for many hours and sign these. So there you go.
And then you can get it telegrammed to you, right to your house.
And you can tell me how you did it. Write to me and explain to me what the process was. Did you have to go, is it like in the Old West, and they'd have to go like a telegraph office and the guy would charge them like a penny per letter, and they would have to like in the Three Amigos when they had to, do you remember that scene?
Yeah. I'll plug patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We have movie nights. That's the big thing I've been plugging. I mean, we have exclusive podcasts on there like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder's Maniac, Spiel Boys, Star Trek The Next Futurama. But also you can watch movies with us. Movies like Society, not necessarily Society, but like it. Maybe I'll just play the ending of this movie on a loop some night.
Or maybe one of the better movies that we unfairly compared Society to, where we spent over an hour comparing it to the all-time classics, the all-time great classics of cinema, literal Oscar winners we compared this film to. Grossly unfair.
Extremely unfair.
Films that had 50 times its budget, we just callously compared it to.
Right. So yeah, Society, not as good as Psycho. I guess that's where we're landing on this. Hey, listen, our music is produced by Chris Corlew. You can find him on twitter.com as the Corlew, or go to shipwreckedsailor.bandcamp.com. Our channel artwork is produced by Michael Vincent Bramley. For more of his work, go to mvbramley.art. Our episode artwork is by Justin Brown, available on Twitter as Justin T. Brown or at artnessbyjustinbrown.com. And finally, additional artwork is by Starlene Hodge. You can find her work at starlenearts.com or on Twitter as StarleneX. Cool. Goodbye.